Thank you for joining us this afternoon. I am Jerry Krentz, Associate Director of Communications for the Duke Endowment and the Fellowship Advisor. Joining me are Philip, our second-year fellow, Tamika, a program officer in the child care program area, and Will, our first-year fellow. We're here to share information about the Duke Endowment and the Fellowship Program. We'll address your specific questions at the end, but please feel free to submit them throughout the webinar using the typing tool in your control panel. And also, please let us know if you have any technical difficulties. The picture you see is of James B. Duke, a prominent tobacco and electric power industrialist who established the Duke Endowment in 1924. His goal was to improve lives and communities in North Carolina and South Carolina by nurturing children, promoting health, educating minds, and enriching spirits. Once he made his fortune in business, Mr. Duke wanted to give back to the community that had supported him. So he directed that the endowment's resources remain in the Carolinas. Mr. Duke made an initial gift of $40 million to establish his foundation. He died just 10 months later and left an additional $67 million to the endowment. Mr. Duke was specific in his indenture of trust about how the Duke Endowment would meet the needs of Carolinians. This commitment led to our 4 program areas: child care, health care, higher education, and rural United Methodist churches. Within these program areas, the endowment makes strategic long-term grants to address root causes of issues and widespread challenges. We often work with nonprofits to test promising approaches. The endowment has an evaluation department that helps us and our grantees identify desired results of projects and then measure their impact. Over the years, the endowment has made significant investments in the Carolinas, as the next slide indicates. We have awarded more than $3.3 billion in grants since 1924. Grant making has grown from decade to decade, from $45,000 in 1925 to nearly $140 million distributed last year. Today, the endowment has about $3.4 billion in assets, making it one of the top 20 U.S. private foundations. Our offices are located in Charlotte, not Durham. This past summer, we moved from downtown to our first standalone headquarters in the Dilworth neighborhood, about a mile away. Our new building is designed to be environmentally sustainable and is LEED Gold certified. We have about 40 employees, including employees in all 4 grant-making areas, as well as in IT, finance, communications, evaluation, and human resources. Now I'm going to turn things over to Philip to talk specifically about the fellowship program.
Good afternoon. The fellowship program began in 2005. I joined the endowment in 2014 as the 9th fellow, and Will Jones, the first-year fellow on the call, is the 10th. There are 2 primary goals for the fellowship program. One is to cultivate future nonprofit and philanthropic leaders, and the other is to encourage creative thinking and bring new perspective to the endowment. The fellowship experience lasts for 2 years as we spend 1 6-month grant cycle in each of our 4 program areas: child care, health care, higher education, and rural church. Typically, the fellow begins in the higher education program area and then rotates through rural church, health care, child care, and begins in higher education and then rotates through health care, rural church, and child care. The commitment typically begins and ends in the summer with a start date in the end of July or beginning of August. As stated before, fellows rotate through each of the 4 grant-making areas. We assist with site visits to current and potential grantees. The endowment has a long-standing tradition of face-to-face contact with our grantees, so a fair amount of travel across the Carolinas is inherent to our work. Fellows participate in projects and research for all program areas, which are guided by the needs of the program area and the interests of the fellow. As a part of his educational rotation, Will is involved with campus sustainability efforts at each of the 4 endowment-supported schools. Often, fellows will participate in site visits with grantees or related organizations. Fellows also complete a capstone project while at the endowment. This signature project can span the entire 2 years of the fellowship, can take any variety of forms, and is personally interesting to the fellow and additive to the endowment. Fellows are not expected to come to the endowment with a specific project in mind. Rather, they develop their project as they consult with staff. Projects should fall within their interest and meet the priorities of the program areas. Some of the projects that have been completed by fellows have included a multifaceted intervention program to improve literacy in rural church communities, an HPV school vaccination site program, and a joint project in healthcare in rural church that focused on Latino health outreach in the Wilmington area. Another capstone was a research project that created a plan to scale up an evidence-based program, Incredible Years, into South Carolina. A recent capstone researched social impact bonds as a possible grant-making tool for the endowment. As part of their professional development, fellows also attend state, regional, and national conferences in addition to other collaborative programming related to our work. There is also the opportunity to participate in leadership positions in statewide philanthropic organizations, such as the North Carolina Network of Grantmakers. Finally, fellows receive performance feedback and coaching from management staff throughout their time at the endowment, which prepares them for leadership positions in nonprofit and philanthropic organizations. I'm now going to turn it over to Tamika Williams, a program officer in our child care program area, to detail the eligibility requirements and desired qualifications of a fellow.
Thank you, Philip. As stated in the indenture, the Duke Endowment was established to improve and support organizations in North and South Carolina. Therefore, our fellowship program follows a very similar model. To be eligible, applicants must fall into one of 2 categories. They must be a current or past resident of North Carolina or South Carolina, or a recent graduate of a college or university in the Carolinas. The pictures you have seen thus far are actually pictures of past and current fellows at the Duke Endowment. The endowment is looking for individuals with an undergraduate degree who also have at least 1 to 2 years of work experience and or a graduate degree. Now that we've had 10 fellows, we have found that some work experience or graduate school training is beneficial to both the fellow and the endowment, particularly as fellows need to be able to navigate the various activities they are responsible for. In addition to strong academics, which can come from any discipline, we look for applicants with a service-oriented background, students who are connected to their communities and community issues in some way. We have had a variety of academic and work backgrounds that you can read more about on our Past Fellows page on the endowment's website. Many ask what our fellowship alumni have gone on to do. We want to give you a few examples. After completing her fellowship program, Ms. Keisha Payton has held 2 manager positions at Citizen Schools. Citizen Schools is a nonprofit that focuses on after-school programs.
She has said that her experiences at the endowment positioned her well for her next job. Our third fellow, Elizabeth Ireland, continued her education through a joint degree program at Duke University and the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill in pursuit of a master's degree in public policy and a law degree. She has now returned to Charlotte and works as an associate at a law firm. Heather Collins, our fifth fellow, managed a student retention project at Johnson C. Smith University, one of our educational beneficiaries. She pursued a master's in education degree from the Graduate School of Education at the University of Pennsylvania and served as the assistant director at the Center for Minority Serving Institutions. Heather now works as the policy analyst in the Office of Educational Access and Success for the Board of Regents of the University System of Georgia. Lastly, Christina Strader, our most recent fellow, is now serving as the Director of Selection Quality for Teach for America's National Office. I'm now going to turn it back to Jerry, so Jerry can talk about the ideal characteristics of a fellow and the compensation and benefits of the fellowship program. Jerry?
Thanks, Tamika. We want to receive applications from all types of backgrounds and disciplines, but there are several characteristics we look for. The fellowship position is very independent, so we look for applicants who are self-directed and motivated and who are flexible and able to multitask. We like to see people who are willing to try something new and bring innovative and fresh thinking to the table. Challenging old or current ideas is encouraged. Critical thinking skills to analyze, interpret grant applications, policy briefs, and published research are important. A portion of each rotation is site visits, so not only are good written and oral communication skills needed when presenting to our board, but also when meeting with grantees. Fellows should have the ability to communicate with people of all walks of life and from diverse backgrounds. We like to say that fellows need to be comfortable in their skin because they will be interacting with church leaders, clinicians, PhDs, and high school graduates. We do not expect applicants to have experiences in all 4 grant-making areas, but we like to see that an applicant has the knowledge of or experience in at least one area. As you can see, we have a competitive salary and benefits package. In particular, it is worth noting that the endowment pays the full cost of an employee's medical insurance, and we also provide a stipend for moving. Will Jones is now going to tell you about the application timeline.
Thanks, Jerry. Our application is currently on our website under the overview selection on the fellowship page. Each year, we receive somewhere between 75 and over 100 applicants. The deadline for this year's application is Monday, January 4, 2016 at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We ask that all candidates submit their applications online along with 2 references and your resume. There will be detailed instructions on the application. All of those dates are on the website, but we want to share some important dates with you now, should you be chosen as a finalist. We will conduct between 12 and 15 phone interviews on January 19th, and then we will invite 6 to 8 semifinalists to lunch in Charlotte on January 27th and 28th. The top 3 candidates will come to the endowment's office on February 9th to participate in a panel interview and have lunch with our management staff. We'll also have makeup days for inclement weather that you can see listed on the PowerPoint slide. Our final decision will be made in March. So that's it. We hope this presentation has given you a better idea of what the fellowship program is, what we are looking for in our applicants, and some more details on our application and selection process. Here's our contact information. Please feel free to contact Philip or me with any questions. In the meantime, does anyone have any questions? Please use the control panel on your screen to type any questions that you may have.
While you are taking time to do that, I wanted to this is Jerry again, and I just wanted to clarify the schedule for the lunch interviews. We will ask the candidates to come in on one of those days, not both. And we will cover your costs if you are invited to come to Charlotte to interview with us. One question has come in about our requirements and if it's possible for an undergraduate who's graduating in May of 2016, if it's possible for he or she to apply. And let me say that we are looking for at least 1 to 2 years of work experience after obtaining an undergraduate degree and or you hold a graduate degree. This is Jerry again. We had a question about what moderate travel means. I would say it can vary from week to week, and sometimes fellows are here in the office every day of the week, and sometimes the fellow is out on the road most days of the week. So it really varies. Some overnight stays are part of that, and we do encourage fellows to participate in some national conferences that come up during the course of the 2 years.
Another question has come in about how many fellows will be accepted into the next cohort. And the answer is we select 1 new fellow each year.
This is Jerry again. A common question is if someone with several years of work experience is considered overqualified. The answer to that is no. We would not consider that overqualified. The purpose of the fellowship program is to cultivate leaders in philanthropy.
Another question has come in asking who the fellows report to and is there a mentoring component to the fellowship? And there's a 2-part answer to the question. The first is that Jerry serves as a supervisor to the fellows day to day for the entire 2 years. But then within each of the 4 6-month cycles through the 4 different program areas, fellows report to someone in that program area, typically the director of each program area. And mentoring is a big part of the fellowship program. Another question has come in asking if the endowment pays for travel expenses, and the answer is yes.
Good evening, everybody. This is Tamika Williams again in the child care program area. We have a question. Will we, I assume this means fellows, will the fellows make decisions about who gets grants? Actually, our grant cycles occur typically twice a year, and fellows work alongside the program officers like myself or the directors of the actual program. And we meet with prospective grantees and we jointly go through applications, and we meaning whomever you may be working with as a fellow and the person in the program area, we come up with what our recommendations are and present those to our board. But ultimately, our board here at the Duke Endowment, our trustees, make final decisions about what grants are supported. We do make recommendations to our board of what we think through our due diligence fit with our priorities and should be something or could be something potentially for us to support.
This is Will. Another question has come in. What is a typical day? I'm assuming you're asking what is a typical day for a fellow. A typical day for a fellow varies just on what department you're in and what's happening at that time and what part of the grant cycle you're in. So if you're in education, you could be going on site visits, or you could be helping with grant analysis, or you could be attending a conference in a different part of the country. It really just depends on what's happening at that time, in that moment.
Another question has come in asking how the Capstone projects are developed and the timeline. And it really depends on each fellow and the work that's going on at the time across the endowment. And fellows are typically encouraged to identify a project working with endowment staff after they've been in the endowment for about 9 to 12 months. And the timeline typically from about the halfway point to the end of the fellowship is when the capstone, really the lion's share of the work is done. And the project is driven by the fellow, but each fellow has a capstone advisory team, which consists of endowment staff members who provide guidance along the way.
This is Jerry again. A question came in about if a salary is bi-weekly, and yes, we are paid bi-weekly. We often get questions about if you have applied for the fellowship before and were not chosen, if you can reapply. And the answer is yes, you can certainly reapply.
We've received a question asking what interaction fellows have with staff members of the endowment outside of program areas, so including human resources, IT, finance. And the answer is fellows, their rotations, and the bulk of their work occurs in the program areas, but there are chances to overlap and interact with those areas, especially if the fellow seeks them out.
The types of agencies that we support generally are nonprofit organizations in North and South Carolina. So if you're in your child care rotation, you'll see a variety of public and private agencies that are nonprofit that are working with at-risk young people who are either in foster care or a juvenile justice type of system, etc., or they're at risk of entering such a system as that. If you're in healthcare, we support if you're in higher ed, we support 4 universities, and so they are specifically named in the indenture of trust by Mr. Duke. So those would be the 4 institutions that you would be working with. If you're in rural church, we work with United Methodist Churches in North Carolina, and you will learn specifically about the types of churches that we support in terms of the size of the community and the types of churches. They're all United Methodist. And certainly if you're in healthcare, we fund healthcare in North and South Carolina and work with not-for-profit hospitals with strategies that are consistent with healthcare priorities. This is Jerry, and we've had a question asking if applicants are further removed from college and graduate school work, if an academic reference is necessary. And what I would say is we would like to have 2 references, and if you would rather that be someone who is in your more recent past, a former employer or that type of thing, then that's fine.
A question has come in asking if fellows participate in board meetings, and the answer is that when a fellow is in a program area that's having a board meeting, the fellow is involved in the meeting.
We are sometimes asked if you can be enrolled in a part-time professional degree program and still apply. And my suggestion would be that you wait and apply later. This is definitely a full-time position. And as you've heard from Will and Philip, you can be all over the place in any given week. So, and there is some overnight travel required. This is Tamika Williams again. I think part of what you're hearing in part of our question and answers
in your questions and what we're given in terms of answers is there's a lot of flexibility, I think, in how I've watched the fellows over the last several years. And so there's a question about what kind of training is there around evaluations. And again, I think what you will see is it depends on the program area that you are in. We do have an evaluation department here, and oftentimes we will bring them in to consult on various projects that are brought to our attention. Sometimes we are interested in just small level pre and post type data, and then we could also be interested in rigorous evaluation, like we want a randomized controlled trial for whatever particular project that's been brought to our attention. That generally is based on the conversations we're having with the grantee, and then that helps us make up some type of opinion about what type of evaluation, if there's one needed, that we would like to accompany that type of project. What a fellow would potentially do is exactly what a program officer would do. We try to familiarize ourselves a lot more with the type of evaluation that may be appropriate for this project if we need one, and we would consult with our evaluation department because they really are the experts and they inform a lot of our work, but they're also great people to consult with so we can think about the various possibilities and what is reasonable for us to be considering. So I think it's a grand opportunity for us to learn a lot, and we've had fellows in the past who have worked very closely with our evaluation department to just familiarize themselves more with the various types of evaluations that are out there that can be done for various projects.
We've had a question about if you can work from somewhere that is outside Charlotte, or if we need, if you need to be in Charlotte. And yes, we ask that people work from our Charlotte office. And we're not trying to be inflexible, but part of the experience for fellows is to be with our staff and have opportunities to learn both informally and formally.
I have a question about examples of new or innovative projects that the endowment is pursuing. Part of what you heard in the presentation is, the endowment is very steeped in, we would say, our tradition, but one of the things that the fellows bring to us is knowledge from also the field and what they know from their educational and work experiences. And so some things that are new or innovative for us to have considered, some of which have been suggestions that come in from fellows, is we have programs like Nurse Family Partnership, which we work in North and South Carolina, which is a home visiting program for new mothers, low-income mothers, and works with them with their newborns for up to 2 years. Rural Church has a Clergy Health Initiative, which we have been funding for multiple years, working with United Methodist Churches in North Carolina. From their research, we were able to see that clergy suffer from depression. Their nutrition and exercise regimens were not very strong. And so our Rural Church Department put together a health initiative with the support of some other partners that really has some promising outcomes for how you can improve clergy health. In the child care arena, we've just started last year funding teen pregnancy prevention models and work in both the Carolinas. And that was for us more, our work typically focused on once children were here, once children were born, we were working on projects. And then we really thought that we needed to go back a little bit further to see if we could do some preventative efforts further upstream, trying to stem the tide of young mothers who are giving birth before they are ready to give birth. And so that's a new project that we are working on. Healthcare has a project, I'm going to get it wrong. Oh, gosh, I'm going to miss it. It left my mind. I'm sorry, guys. But healthcare has some new initiatives that they're working around minorities and disparities in care. They're doing some work, and Mika Sales is leading up a lot of that work. So you will definitely see some new things that we are struggling with at the endowment and trying to figure out how we can make a footprint in those areas and bring more attention to them across the Carolinas.
We've received a question asking whether the work experience requirement is needed by the time of application or the time of selection. And the answer is it's needed by the time that the fellow would begin next July or August.
So we received another question. What conferences do fellows attend? Example of some of the conferences that fellows attend would be Grant Makers for Education, or GFE, or NC Networkers of Grant Makers. And there's a variety of other conferences that we attend.
The first-year fellow each year attends the Council on Foundations, and the second-year fellow attends the Southeastern Council of Foundations each year. And there's also some smaller conferences that fellows have the chance to attend while they're in a program area, including Grant Makers for Education and the North Carolina Small and Rural Hospitals Conference.
We've had a question if the Duke Endowment gives grants outside of North Carolina and South Carolina. And no, all of our grantees are in the two states. Mr. Duke believes that he made his fortune in the Carolinas, so he wanted to give back to the region. And so that's why he stipulated that all of the grantees are in North Carolina and South Carolina.
So if you're looking at our, what is our final report? Our end of year report.
Annual report.
Our annual report, that's what it's called. Our annual report. If you're looking at our annual report, you may see grants that are made where the grantee is listed to be someone out of state, like you might see the Annie E. Casey Foundation, which is in Baltimore, Maryland. But our work with the Annie E. Casey Foundation is specific to work in North and South Carolina. So you may have someplace that's headquartered in a different state, but their work is concentrated in North or South Carolina, and that's how we're able to support their efforts.
We've received a question asking whether fellows are permitted to pursue additional professional development opportunities outside of the conferences that I mentioned earlier. And each fellow develops with Jerry a professional development plan, which can include conferences if they're salient to the fellow's interest in the endowment's work. So the short answer is yes, if they're appropriate conferences.
We had a question about fellows being trained in grants and grant writing. So we are, all of our program officers are very involved with grantees in developing the grants that come to us. We, of course, don't do grant writing because we are, that's for the grantees to do. But we have, fellows are really encouraged to participate in every level of endowment work, and some of that is working with the IT department to work on our grants database, and certainly to work with program officers in reviewing grants that come into us.
I think the more experience you get with a grant, and once you actually see a proposal that comes in, when you see the differences in them, you will certainly know grants that are well written and that cover multiple aspects that you would want to see in making some determinations about a project. So you certainly get plenty of experience with reading through grant applications, and certainly when you're going across the program areas, I think you'll probably be very amazed by the differences that you may see in applications across the program, just with the different things that people are requesting and how they lay out a grant application. So I certainly think you get stronger in understanding better about grants and how grants are constructed.
We had a question about internships counting toward the 1 year of work experience, and yes, I would say an internship would count toward that experience. So we had a question about clarifying the 1 to 2 years before joining the endowment, and what we say is that we hope that people have at least 1 to 2 years of work experience after obtaining an undergraduate degree and or hold a graduate degree. And we really find that is beneficial to both the fellows and their experience here and to the endowment and the way that fellows are able to hit the ground running. Let me just clarify a little bit about also the obtaining a continuing education and obtaining a certificate while you're here at the endowment, and we generally don't do that. What we do provide, as Philip said, is professional level development opportunities for fellows to go to conferences and to learn about the role of philanthropy from the foundation side. But we typically don't have fellows pursue a form of certification while they're with us. So I want to thank you all for the wonderful questions and for your interest in our fellowship program. We've really enjoyed spending time with you. If we've overlooked one of your questions, please feel free to email us, and we'll be happy to answer anything that you have, any questions that you have still. Thank you again for joining us this afternoon.